We're learning the second Sikha of Parshas Shelach in Chelek Yudches on page 150. This is a Sikha on a piece of Gemara in Saita which discusses the names of the Meraglim. And the Rabbi here takes a simple little piece of Gemara and explains a very profound approach to what the mistake of the Meraglim was. We know the explanation that the Alter Rebbe gives in Likutei Torah regarding the mistake of the Meraglim. They wanted to stay in the Midbar and have all their time spent in learning Torah, not having to deal with the Gashmias of the world. The Rebbe will bring this Hesber and take it to a whole new level and explain every single detail of this little piece of Gemara, detail by detail, with a tremendously amazing message of what we can take from the story of the Meraglim. Es steht in Gemara. Says in the Gemara as follows: Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, Davaze Meseiris B'Yadeinu Maviseinu. This is a tradition in our hands from our ancestors. Meraglim al Shem Maseyim Nikru. The names of the Meraglim is based on their actions. V'Ano le'olsa B'Yadeinu ele echad. However, we only know of one of the names of what the meaning of the name is. And which name is that? Sesur ben Michal. What is the meaning of this name? Sesur shesasar ma'asav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He destroyed the Eibishter's actions. And Michal she'asa atzmei mach. That he made Hashem to be small. Amar Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, Af anu naimar, we as well can say, Nachbi ben Vafsi. The meaning of another name, which is Nachbi ben Vafsi. Nachbi shehechbi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nachbi means that he covered Hashem's words. And Vafsi means Shepisa al midaisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he skipped over Hashem's attributes. So generally speaking, as Rashi says, and the Rebbe will soon quote in the Sikha and explain all details, but just to give the general explanation here, both names Sesur ben Michal and Nachbi ben Vafsi are explaining how the Meraglim did not follow Hashem's words, that Eretz Yisrael is a good land and Yidden should enter into Eretz Yisrael. They came back with a negative report and therefore they destroyed Hashem's plans, Hashem's words, or Hashem's actions, as the Rebbe will explain. But before we get into the details of the name, the Rebbe focuses on the general statement here of Rav Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan. Let into Rashi, as they also b'yadeinu ele echad meint, when it says in the Gemara that we only have one interpretation of one name. What this means is, Einan yodim lidroish as mir veisen sedarshenin nor einem from the Meraglim. So Surah ben Michal, we only know how to explain one of the names of the Meraglim. Unleitem darf man sagen. So if that's what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, so then we have to say, as Rabbi Yochanan was darshent euch die Namen Nachbi ben Vafsi, das heißt zwei Namen. So Rabbi Yochanan that also explains an additional name, Nachbi ben Vafsi, so he's explaining two names. Halt nit wie Rabbi Yitzchak as le'alsa b'yadeinu ele echad. He disagrees with Rabbi Yitzchak that says that we could only explain one name. Aber, however, al pizeh stellen sich kam shaylos in the Maimer. So we have the following questions here on this Gemara between what Rabbi Yitzchak says and what Rabbi Yochanan says, and then some general questions on this whole Gemara here. Aleph, number one, was ist also schwer zu einteichen al derech hadrosh the Maisim from the Meraglim and Zeir and Nemen? Why is it so difficult to explain the names of the Meraglim that it's connected to their actions? Bis, as Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan haben das gekannt tan nur bei einem oder zwei von die ideale Nemen. That Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan say that they only found it to be possible to explain their names regarding one or two names. Mit was seinen die Nemen anders von die gar viele Nemen in Teire, was mir gefunden auf sie, der Rosh Chazal. How are these names any different from many of the names in the Torah that we find that Chazal explain the meaning of the names? So shouldn't it be simple or easy enough to find an explanation for the names of all of the Meraglim? Emes, and now it's true. We're speaking here about drush, expounding upon their names and explaining it in a way of drush, but there are certain rules of how you darshan. It's not just a free-for-all to darshan however you wish. However, the fact is that the part of drush and Torah is a broader approach, Hayais, as der Inyan Anidrash darf nicht sein, mechuven bediegt zum postenden Teich und ausgehalten like alle Aisias vom Wort. When it comes to drush, it does not have to be precise according to every letter that there is here, that it should all fit perfectly. The idea of drush is that you can spin it a little bit or change it a little bit in order to create a new pshat in the word. That's what drush means. Bis wer steht in Sfarim, there's the famous statement that it says in Sfarim, as ein meshivin ala drush. When someone gives you a drush on something, you can't argue with that. There's no answers because this is the way he's expounding the word. Even if it's not precise, it's accepted according to Torah. But now the question here is, the Rebbe continues, ubefrat, as me gefinne befeirischen Chazal droshes auf andere shemes ha-meraglim. We clearly find that all the names of the meraglim are explained. Biz as in Tanchume zene faran droshes auf alle von sei. In the Tanchume, there's a drasha explaining each one of their names, connected to their actions. So why does the Gemara say that either only one could be explained, or Rabbi Yochanan says a second one could be explained? Beis, another question here is, was is the main von Lashon Rabbi Yochanan, af anu noima? What's the meaning of what Rabbi Yochanan is saying, we as well will say? Rabbi Yochanan doesn't simply dash in another name, but he gives this introduction, af anu noima. If he's coming to add an explanation of another name, that we can explain two of the names. Rabbi Yitzchak is saying one name, Rabbi Yochanan is coming and saying, no, not one, two. But what is he saying? Af anu noime, we as well can say. Gimel, von dem was steht, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, nit Rabbi Yochanan Omar. Since the Gemara says the word Omar before Rabbi Yochanan and not Rabbi Yochanan Omar, the rule always is, in the Gemara, when it says Omar first, that means it's just a statement being said, not arguing with what was said before. When it says the word Omar after the name, that means that he's responding and arguing to what was said before. So here it says Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Is mochach, it's clear, adas is nit aplukte zwischen Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan. There's no argument here. No, Rabbi Yochanan is blaze meisif of divrei Rabbi Yitzchak. He's coming to add. Rabbi Yitzchak darshent one name and he darshens the second. Das ist doch the pshata teve af anu noima. That's the simple meaning of when he says af, we as well. Nit kriegt of Rabbi Yitzchak. Sagt nicht biyadenu alle shnayim. As the Rebbe was medayik before, Rabbi Yochanan didn't say that unlike Rabbi Yitzchak, I say no, that there's two names to darshan. No, that is meisef adrash. If nachmi ben vavsi, he's adding. He's adding and saying that you can also explain the name nachmi ben vavsi, but he's not arguing. But the question is, wie bald is Rabbi Yochanan gitzu adrash auf a zweiten Namen, since he is adding another drash and a second name, is doch mecholik mit Rabbi Yitzchak, weil gesagt, lei also biyadenu ela echad. Rabbi Yitzchak didn't simply dash in one name. Rabbi Yitzchak says we could only figure out the drash of one name. And Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, no, we can dash in a second. So isn't it clear that he's arguing? So why does it say, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, af anu noimar, indicating that there's no machlokes here? Daled, Ve'ikir, and here comes a fundamental question on this entire Gemara. V'bald, as al shem aseim nikru, since they were called with these names, even before they went out to Eretz Yisrael as meraglim, noch frier wie Moshe tzeke kliben, and actually even before Moshe Rabbeinu chose them, these were their names. Und das is Meseiris ma'aviseinu, and this is a tradition. Was in Meseiris is nitshayches kemachleikis. The expression of a tradition means that everybody agrees to this and there's no argument. This is the meaning of their names. Is wie kommt es, as Moshe tzeies gekliben? So how does Moshe Rabbeinu choose these individuals to be the meraglim? Ubefrat, as es ist doch a klal, as le'olam yivdek adam b'shemes. There is a rule that if you want to know about the character of a person, so you inspect, you investigate their character by looking at their name. So why does Moshe Rabbeinu not look at the meanings of their names to know that these people are not fit to be the meraglim? Hey, final question here is, wie stimmt es mit dem Maimah Chazal, as they zene gewen bei Oster tzadikim, that at that time the meraglim that were chosen were tzadikim. Was al pizez mashma as sheirish hanhogas u'maisa meraglim can zayin oich bat tzadikim. So we understand that the root cause of their behavior and what they did and their plan that they had is something that can be even by tzaddikim. But here, the Gemara is explaining their names, that these were people that destroyed Hashem's actions, they covered Hashem's words. That doesn't sound like a behavior of tzaddikim. So how can we say that at that time, when they were chosen, they were tzaddikim? L'chayre, volt man auf dem Kushya Beis Va'Gimel Gekent Empfinen. So seemingly, we can answer regarding the second and third question, which focuses on whether Rabbi Yochanan is arguing with Rabbi Yitzchak or is adding to Rabbi Yitzchak. So we could explain as follows. Mitlei also biyadenu elo echad. When Rabbi Yitzchak says also that we have figured out, it came up to us to see and understand only one of the names. Meint Rabbi Yitzchak bloß zu sagen, what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is, as es nicht ergangen von der Messias biyadenu ma'aviseinu nor ein drash. There was this tradition from our ancestors that the names have a meaning, and that tradition of our ancestors didn't reach us only regarding one name. But it's not talking about whether we can figure out how to darshan all the names. Of course, it's possible to figure out the rest of the names. Rabbi Yitzchak is referring to the tradition. The tradition only reached us regarding one name. Certainly, you could figure out how to darshan the other names on our own if we want. On the Rav sagt Rabbi Yochanan. On that, Rabbi Yochanan comes and adds. He's not arguing. The tradition, he agrees, was only one name that was received. But he adds and says, Afanu noima, that we as well can say. All that we've received in the tradition is the explanation of one name. We can add and explain an additional name. So he's not arguing. He's just adding that in addition to the tradition that Rabbi Yitzchak is sharing, he's saying that we can also explain another name. Aber es bleibt doch die Kashya now. But then there's still the question remains, the first question that we ask, which is, was hat Rabbi Yochanan gedarshent nor ein Namen und nicht die andere Shemes HaMeraglim? Why did Rabbi Yochanan only explain one name and not the rest of the names? It seems to be possible, and as you see in the Medrash, that all names could be explained. So why did Rabbi Yochanan say that we as well could only darshan one name? And also regarding this entire explanation here, that there's two things here. There's the tradition, there's the Messiah, and for that we only know one name. And then there is the other name that Rabbi Yochanan added. So this entire pshat doesn't really fit into the exact words of the Gemara, and it's not the way Rashi explained it. What's the precise words of the Gemara? Loi also biyadenu elo echad. We have not figured out how to darshan only one name. Nit v'yesh biyadenu rak echad v'chayetze b'zeh. The Gemara doesn't say, and we have this one explanation as a tradition. Was l'chayre is mashmousai. So the meaning of the words loi also biyadenu means as der echad is Rabbi Yitzchak's drash, was hat sich eingegeben darshenen. Loi also biyadenu means he figured it out. That's what also means, that he looked and figured out how to darshan. Biyadenu, if it were just saying the Gemara that we have in our hands, so that's a tradition that's handed down from hand to hand or from one generation to the next. But because it says also, that means that Rabbi Yitzchak is saying that we figured out how to darshan one name. So then why is the Gemara saying that it's a Messias? What does that mean? So the Rabbi explains, when the Messias is given nor as Hashem Masayim Nikru. The Messias was that we had a tradition that all names of Meraglim are connected to their actions. And then Rabbi Yitzchak says, and we figured out one name, how to darshan what this name means. And then Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, there's another name that we can figure out. That's what it seems like the pshat in the Gemara is. V'chein kosav b'pirish Rashi kanal. That's what Rashi says. The meaning of le'olsa b'yadenu means ein ana yodim lidrash. Rashi doesn't say the pshat that was suggested here, that le'olsa b'yadenu means that we haven't received the tradition regarding only one name. No, but we haven't figured out how to darshan one name. The tradition is only regarding the fact that there's a meaning for these names. If so, the whole question comes back, what's going on over here? Are Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan arguing or not? Rabbi Yitzchak is saying we only can figure out one name. Rabbi Yochanan is saying we can figure out another name. But then from the language of the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Afon and Neymar, it seems like they're not arguing. So we're back to that question. Now the Rebbe will turn to the details of the drashas of these two names. Euch darf man verstehen in die drashas Kufa. Was meint, to number one, Aleph, what does it mean when it says Shesosar Maisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That Sesur ben Michal being one of the Meraglim, so he destroyed the Eibish's actions. In was Zetman by the Meraglim as mod zerstört Maisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What is it that we see that they destroyed an action, or that the Eibishter did, or something the Eibishter created that they destroyed? True, they came and lied and they said a negative report about Eretz Yisrael, and they stopped Yidden of going into Eretz Yisrael, the Eibishter's plan. But what actions of the Eibishter did they destroy? Rashi is mefarish. Rashi explains, Sosa Dvorov. They contradicted Hashem's words. Hikchish v'asa soine shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They contradicted, denied Hashem's promise that the land is good. They became Hashem's enemy. Badoi, they said a lie. Aber, that's Rashi's pshat, but der Pirish kemezagen nar loit zayin girsin Gemara Sosa Dvorov. This is because Rashi has a different version in the Gemara, that it says that not that they destroyed Hashem's actions, they destroyed or contradicted Hashem's words. Aber nit loit unze girse shesasar meisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's not our version in the Gemara, that they destroyed Hashem's actions. Warum durch makchizayin divrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu and asa seine shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu badoi is men nit seisem meisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if they are contradicting Hashem's promise that the land is a good place, but they're not destroying Hashem's actions. So in our gears of the Gemara, this needs an explanation. What does it mean that they destroy Hashem's actions? The Marsha is mefarish. The Marsha explains as follows: As meisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu da, zene di eises v'nisim v'es der Rebbe hat getan mit Yidden a reis geindig from Mitzrayim. The actions refer to all the wonders and miracles that the Rebbe performed when the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim. Und sasar meisav. What is the word? What do these words sasar meisav mean? Meint hister v'kisa oisan kile nerei oisan. That the Meraglim, not that they destroyed, but rather they covered these miracles. They ignored all the miracles that Hashem performed, and they didn't believe that Hashem could perform miracles when the Yidden are going to come into Eretz Yisrael. So the word hister over here means covered, or sasar is hister, which means covered. That's the Marsha's pshat. Aber der Pirish is nit glatik. This explanation of the Marsha does not fit smoothly into the words of the Gemara. Weil the Lashon is sasar. The Gemara used the word sasar. What's the translation? Zerstört. Von Lashon stiras binyan. Literally it means to destroy, to demolish, like when you demolish a building. Okedemochach von Marsha gufu. You could see that the Marsha is struggling with this, and he has to take the word out of the simple meaning. Was frier verteidigt der sasar hister. He sort of switches the word from sasar to hister, which means to conceal, to cover. And then he explains that it means that he covered. But the Marsha does not fit with the simple meaning of the word sasar, which means that they destroyed Hashem's actions. So we're back to our question. What does it mean that the Meraglim destroyed Hashem's actions? Beis, moving on to the next Pirish, the next name, Oif Hichbi Dvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zakt Rashi. Nachbi means that he hid Hashem's words. Hichbi dvarav v'loyamar kamois sheheim. He hid Hashem's words and he didn't say it as is. Is nit move on. So the question here is, nit die Reit von Eibishter hat behalten gesagt nit kamois sheheim. It's not the words of the Eibishter that they repeated, not the way it was said to them. That's not what they hid. Nor das was hat gesehen in Eretz Yisrael, die Gutskeit von Land, rather the goodness of the land, is what they did not report properly, and they came and gave a negative report that Yidden shouldn't go into Eretz Yisrael. The Eibishter came and gave the promise and told them that they should go into the good land, and then they saw what they saw themselves, and then they did not give that positive report. But they didn't talk about what the Eibishter said. They just didn't give their positive report, so it's not that they hid Hashem's words, they hid and didn't give the proper report of what they saw. So why are we saying, Hichbi devarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Gimel, and then it says Lahalan, Oif Shepisa al Midaisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ben Vavsi means that they skipped over the Eibishter's midais, the Eibishter's attributes. Taich Rashi Dilig Shalei Omrei Kemei Shehem. They skipped over Hashem's midais and they didn't put it as is. Und sagt nicht, was zenen die Midaisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is it referring to when it says the Eibishter's midais? Was hat sie übergehebt, that they skipped over it, und nicht übergegeben zu Yidden, and they did not give it over to the Yidden, wie hat gedacht, as they should have. So Rashi doesn't spell out, what is it that we're referring to, the Eibishter's midais. Der Marsha lernt, so here the Marsha explains, as der Hechbi und Pisa, when it says that they hid Hashem's words, they skipped over Hashem's attributes, meint nit, as hat nit übergesagt die Reit kemois sheheim, doesn't mean, as Rashi says, that they did not give over the Eibishter's words as is, nor rather, as by im gufes gewen, hichbi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But regarding themselves, the Eibishter's words were hidden from them, meaning they did not themselves believe in Hashem's promise. By im alein, seine Gewinn verbehalten, das heißt, hat nicht geglaubt, die Rede von Eibischen Sheheid ala Aretz Sheyitova. They did not accept, they hid from themselves the words of the Eibishter that the land is a good land. Und Pisam Midoisov Shekalish Baruch Hu, allein hat übergehebt, nicht geglaubt, the Midoisov Shekalish Baruch Hu, as Neisen Schar Toiv Lemaminim. They, or him, Nachbi ben Vavsi, himself, did not believe. He skipped over and did not believe Hashem's midah, which is to give a good reward for those that believe in Hashem, and therefore the Eibusher would perform miracles for them. That's what the Gemara means. So it's referring to the Meraglim themselves, their lack of Amunah in the Eibusher. But according to the Marshal's Pshat, the question is, what's the chiluk? So why is there a difference here? Was benegeh to dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, regarding Hashem's words, is given hechbi, nachbi. They hid Hashem's words. And regarding Hashem's attributes, pisa, vavsi, that they skipped over it. Haben sie beide Leuten Pirish HaMashah demselben Teichen, Shalei Hamen. The Mashah says it both means the same thing, that they did not believe in Hashem's promise. So why does it say hechbi and then vavsi if they both mean the exact same thing, that they did not believe? So, those are the questions here in this Gemara. We have many questions here, both on the general structure of the Gemara between Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan. Are they arguing? Are they not arguing? And regarding all the details of the names in Rashi and even in the Marsha, it's not very clear how to explain this in the simple words of the Gemara. So the point of the explanation of all of this is as follows. Das was Rabbi Yitzchak sagt, v'anu le'alsa b'yadeinu ela echad, that we only have one name to explain. His kavanasai, his intention is as follows. Not that we have no idea how to explain the other names. As the Rabbi pointed out in the Medrash, all names are explained. Nor as the drash v'limud, explaining, and the lesson that we take from this was limud mevi lidei maise. The point of the lesson is that we should apply it in action. Or if the andere shemis hameraglim, regarding the rest of the names of the meraglim, is like also biyadenu, brengt nit uns lidei maise. It's not something that we have in our hands, meaning it does not apply to us. The message of the other names does not relate to us. Was mir darfen sich ablernen von die shemis hameraglim. What the lesson that we have to take from the other names, yes, there are pirushim in the Medrash. However, the lessons of the other names of the meraglim only pertain to them and not to us. There's one name that's relevant to us. The drashes from the andere shemis hameraglim are in Egeya, Nor, Tzu, and in the Aveda von Aviseinu. The meaning of their names, which explains their actions and the mistake that they made, is relevant to our ancestors, to them. Their level of how they were serving Hashem. They had to be careful and be forewarned of all the various different aspects of the mistakes that brought the meraglim to what they did, that's hinted in the other names. That's expressed in the other names. But for us, in our hands, what's relevant to us is Layolsa Ela Echad. There's only one name, there's only one message that we could learn from this one name that's relevant. Mir darfen sich bewahren in Nar von Einjinen. There's only one message that we have to take from this one name, Sesur b'Michal, Sezal bei uns nit sein, kein Sosar Maisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That we should not make the same mistake of destroying Hashem's actions. That's the only message that's relevant to us, which the Rabbi will explain soon in the Sikha. What is this one point that's relevant to us that we learn only from this name? So that's what the Gemara means. There was a Mesiris B'Aviseinu B'Yadeinu to explain all names. But then there was one name that Rabbi Yitzchak said we can figure out how it applies and it's relevant for us. Just one of them. The rest of the names, yes, there are pirushim, but they're not relevant to us in our times. We have a different kind of Aveda than our ancestors had. So to that, Rabbi Yochanan adds, he's not arguing, but he's adding, that we can explain the name Nachbi ben Vavsi, and what he's adding is as follows. Yes, it's true, as if in selben Eufen Wieses gewähnt bei Aveseinu, the name and the meaning of the name, in the way it applied to our ancestors, so there's only one message that is equal the way it was by our ancestors, and it also applies to us as well. That one message Rabbi Yochanan agrees to Rabbi Yitzchak that there's only one name with one message that's equal to the Aviseinu and to us. Aber es ist uns negeya euch der Heroas adrash von Nachbi ben Vavsi. But then there's another name that we could expound and explain of the name Nachbi ben Vavsi. Aber nit auf dem Eufen wie es ist gewähnt bei Aviseinu. And this name also has a message to us. But the message that we can take from this name, Nachbi ben Vavsi, is not the same message, and it's not the same way as our ancestors have to take the message of the meaning of this name. The way our ancestors applied the meaning and the message of this name does not relate to us. Nor af onu noima. We can take a meaning of this name and apply it to our Aveda, which is different than the way it was Aviseinu. Wie das ist behessen zu unser Madrege. The way it applies to us. So that's the meaning of af onu. Af onu meaning, I agree to Rabbi Yitzchak, that to explain the names of the Meraglim, that it should be a message of the way it was by Aviseinu, and that very same message applied to us. There's only one name, only one message. But then there's an additional message that we can take from Nachbi ben Vavsi, although it's not the same as our ancestors explained it. To them it's relevant in one way, and to us it has relevance in a completely different way. But afanu naima, this name also has a message to us, although it's different from the way it was applied by our ancestors. This is the general outline of how to explain this Gemara. So Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan are not arguing. Rabbi Yochanan is adding another name that's relevant to us. Now, the specific meaning of these two names and exactly what they're saying will be explained, but the Rabbi here gives an introduction. First, we need to understand what exactly was the root of the mistake of the Meraglim. We'll understand all this by first introducing what is explained in many places. As der Mocker von Chet HaMeraglim is gewähnt das, weil sie haben nicht gewollt herausgehen von der Seder Achaim in Midbar und kommen in Eretz Yisrael. The source of their mistake was not that they simply did not want to listen to the Eibishter and they didn't want to go enter into Eretz Yisrael because they were afraid. No, rather they did not want to leave the lifestyle, the very ruchnisdige lifestyle they had in the Midbar, and enter into Eretz Yisrael, on Eretz Neisheves, a settled land. Was they were told what's going to be when they come into Eretz Yisrael. They're going to have to work, plant, as darf sein Adam Chayrish, Adam Zereya, to plow and plant. And they'll have to be occupied with the material needs of the world and working in the field. And that's what they did not want. They wanted to remain in the Midbar, in a place where they're surrounded by the Anani Yakovid, and sit and learn Torah all day and all night. The way it's explained in Lekutei Torah and Chassidus, they didn't want to descend from the place where they were in the Midbar, which is Eilam HaMachshava, a deeper and more spiritual world, Machshava, in Eilam HaDibur, into a world of Dibur, which is more external, communicated and expressed outwardly, or Befrat in Eilam HaMaisa. Specifically, they did not want to come down into a world of action, into Eretz Yisrael, where they have to do the actions of the mitzvahs in the land, and so on. In Avedis Hashem Gufa, regarding Avedis Hashem, so there are two components, and here is what their focus was. Is das der Chiluk zwischen Torah und mitzvahs. Their lifestyle in the Midbar and their lifestyle in Eretz Yisrael, that would be, is generally speaking the difference between spending most of your time learning Torah or in doing the mitzvahs in the physical world. Torah is hichachmaschem ubinaschem. Torah is wisdom. Limud, ba'avone, ba'asage, b'seichel, machshave, learning, understanding in your mind. Part of Limud Torah is also to verbally say the words of Torah. That's part of the mitzvah. So that's the world of machshava and dibur. Mitzvahs is in yonan maisa. Mitzvahs are all fulfilled, or most of them are fulfilled in action. So that's what mitzvahs pertain to, the world of action. Haben die Meraglim gewollt bleiben in Midbar, so they wanted to remain in the Midbar, with the Iker Eisik for Yidden is given Limudat Torah. Their main occupation all day was sitting and learning Torah. Und nicht reingehen in Eretz Yisrael, was dort ist the Iker Aveda in Maisa Mitzvahs. Entering Eretz Yisrael, their main occupation will be in the actions of the mitzvahs. That's what they did not want. They wanted to experience and continue living with their Ruchnis, the Aveda of learning Torah and being separated from the Gashmis of the world in the Midbar. However, their mistake was Loya Medre Shiker Ela Maisa. This kind of Aveda of sitting and learning Torah all day is not the main purpose. Rather, the main purpose is the action, the mitzvahs. The kavanah from the Bria is Lasses leizbarach dire betachteinim. The purpose of creation is to create a dwelling for Hashem here below, in the lowest elements of existence. Und das wird aufgetan beike durch Aveda betachteinim maisa mitzvahs in die dvarim gashmiyim. So therefore, this is achieved through fulfilling the physical mitzvahs with physical objects. The actions of the mitzvahs. That's the main purpose of creation. That was their mistake. This is the general explanation that's explained in Likutei Torah and in other places regarding the mistake of the Meraglim. Now the Rebbe takes this to a different level. However, even this explanation is still difficult to understand. Since the Meraglim, it says at that time, were ksherim, they were tzaddikim. How do they make such a fundamental mistake? As me darf nicht haben, the Aveda von Maisa mitzvahs, that it's not necessary to do mitzvahs. They'll remain in the midbar, learn Torah day and night. No need for mitzvahs. How do they make such a fundamental mistake? So this explanation, look at the Torah, explains how they weren't Rishayim, that were just afraid and didn't believe in Hashem and didn't want to enter into Eretz Yisrael. It explains their mistake on a more ruchniistic, deeper level. But still, there's a very fundamental mistake here that they made. Everyone knows that the main kavan is loya medreshik ela maisa, the maisa mitzvahs to make a dir b'tachteinim. How did the Meraglim not see this? Muz ben zagen. So therefore, what we must say here is as follows: As euch zei haben gewusst, as es muss sein maisa. They were well aware that there has to be action. V'adarabba ha maisa hu eiker. The action is the main focus. Now, sie haben gehalten. However, their opinion was, as es genug die Maisa ha-mitzvahs, wie sie werden getan in Midbar. The actions of the mitzvahs necessary, it can also be fulfilled, and it's enough the way it's being done in the Midbar. But am eichen Midbar hat mekayim gewen kame v'kame mitzvahs. Even in the Midbar, they did many mitzvahs. And as ayach mekayim gewen binyani yarishos dem kol masecha l'shem shemayim, and also they fulfilled in the Midbar, even regarding the things that are your own personal things that you do, that even your actions should all be for the sake of heaven. So they had that in the Midbar as well, to some extent. Es muss aber nicht sein, die Vernummenkeit in Meise, in Azah Eufen, wie das ist in Eretz Yisrael. However, it's not necessary to take this to the extent of the way it will be when they enter into Eretz Yisrael, where their full focus is going to be to do the actions of the mitzvahs in the land, to that degree that they weren't ready for. That they said is not necessary. Yeah, the main thing is the action. So even here in the Midbar, we can fulfill these mitzvahs. That was their mistake. So they didn't chas v'shalom make the mistake to not at all believe in the whole union of doing mitzvahs, but the extent of it, as the Rabbi will here explain. The beer in them, the explanation here is as follows. So let's take a closer look at this lashon of the Mishnah, loya medrish iker ela maisa. The pnimi is a gepshat in loya medrish iker ela maisa. When it says that medrish, the learning, is not the main thing, but rather the main purpose is the action. It does not only mean nor as darf sein sai Talmud and sai Maisa. So you have the two different components, two different aspects of serving Hashem. You can serve Hashem with Talmud, with learning, using your seichel to learn. And then there's action. There's the things that you have to do, the mitzvahs. Als besondere inyanim. Now you could look at them as two different things, two separate things, each one that's being done by different kaiches of the person. Und von sei beide is Maisa deker. And between these two, which one is more important? Which one is more significant? Which one is the more of a purpose? Maisa is more important than Medrash. So you have Medrash for itself, which could be fulfilled b'shleimus. Then you have Maisa for itself, that could be fulfilled b'shleimus. Between the two of them, Maisa is more important. That's not the pshat of this Mishnah. That's the simple pshat, but there's a much deeper pshat here. Nor rather, what this Mishnah is saying is, as der Iker from Klolos Avedus Hashem is as das Alarub kommen in Maisa. What's the primary focus of everything that a person is doing in serving Hashem, including his learning? The Iker of his learning itself, das heißt Euche Medrash Atzmai, the main thing of everything you're doing, including your learning, is Maisa, when it leads to Maisa. We're not just looking at Maisa separately and saying that Maisa has a certain advantage over Talmud. No, the advantage of Maisa is relevant and significant for everything, for Talmud itself, for the learning itself. If it's lacking the action, so then you're missing the ikir even of the Talmud, even of your learning as well. To say this in different words, so to look at it in a broader sense, when we talk about Medrash versus Maise, what does Medrash really include? Those ways of serving the Eibishter, bei welchem is ausgetan von Welt und Maise, where a person is removed and separated from the world and the actions in the world. That's what Medrash is. It doesn't only refer to learning, but it means when a person is separated and serving Hashem on a more ruchnisdige level, connecting to the Eibishter, not within the physical world. Is zeir ikir und tachlis umatare. The only reason, what's the real purpose of all of the learning and all of that part of a person's Aveda where he's removed of the world? The purpose of that itself is to poil sein in der Aveda from Maise. That it should have an impact and it should lead and come to action. Or Kamayim Chazal, Talmud, Mevile de Maise, the greatness of learning Torah, Gadol Talmud. Why is Talmud great? Only because it brings to action. So we see that it's not two separate things, Talmud and Maise. The greatness of Talmud itself is because it leads to Maise. So that's also the pshat in Loya Medrash Ikka Ela Maise, that the ikr of Medrash is the fact that it brings to Maise. That's the real pshat, that's the deeper pshat in this Mishnah. Now, however, the fact that the ikr of Talmud itself is Maise, what does this mean? Why is the ikr of Talmud Maise? Why can't we separate the two and say, Talmud is Talmud, I could be learning a sugya and I could understand it fully, whether it's relevant or leads to action or relates to action, doesn't matter. And then there's another part of my Avedis Hashem, the actions, the mitzvahs that I do. That's a totally different thing. But here we're saying no, the shleimus and the ikr of Maise, of the Talmud that is itself, is the fact that it's connected or that it leads to action. Why is it so? So here there are three different ways of how to explain this. In them, Talmud Mevle de Maise, the fact that a person's learning leads to action, and these two things are connected, there are three different approaches of how to explain this on three different levels of why this is. Aleph, the first and basic approach is, Maise is der Even Abeichen, as der Talmud was brengt l'dei Maise is wie es darf sein. It's the action. In other words, if it's something that is applicable, that's the measuring stick to see that your thinking, the theory, the learning that you have is real, is true. Which means as follows. Mitzad der Rachvas von Seichel können sein Svaras Lakan and Lakan. In the world of ideas, when a person is learning a sugya in Torah and he has a svara this way, a svara the other way, so because in the world of ideas you can have all kinds of theories and all kinds of approaches, so therefore you never know which approach is really correct. Und die Avchane, welche svara is emesla mitoit, so to know which approach is the correct approach and which approach is flawed, what's the Even Abeichen for this? Is wenn a svara is ausgehalten defiert bis zum Psak Din alibe de Hilches Elepoil. If there is a certain svara that is the Psak Din, it could be applied. It's not just a theory. It's not just true in the world of theory that I have a certain idea, a certain approach, but it's something that could actually be applied. That's the Even Abeichen, that's the indication that this is a svara that holds water and can all the way be applied to action. In Pashute Werte, wenn das stimmt mit dem Psak Din, was steht in Mishnah Chulu Shulchan Aruch, Dvar Havai Zu Halacha. If a svara that you say is fitting with what it says on Shulchan Aruch, and therefore it could actually be applied, you're not saying a theory that a certain svara in Torah, but it's something that could be applied, so then that's the Even Abeichen, that it's not a flawed idea, but it's a real idea according to Torah, it's a true idea. So in other words, we're talking about all in the world of Seichel, all in the world of Limud HaTorah. And there, in the world of Limud HaTorah Gufa, only if it's something that could be applied, then we know that this svara is not a flawed svara, that it's correct, it's a correct idea, it's a correct psak. The Rebbe applies this also, Ba'avedas HaNefesh Meintes, regarding Aveda, as the Rebbe said before, when we talk about Medrash, we're not just talking about learning, but we're talking more broadly about all of a person's Aveda that's removed of the world, the Ruchni is the Aveda of the person. So the Echacha, as a hezbainenus, when a person is thinking and contemplating, ledugme, what? In the Reimim Mesakel Yisbarach Yisala, V'shiflas Adam, thinking about the greatness of the Eibishter and how small and insignificant a person is mitanemes. How do you know that it really touched you? That it's for real, and it's not just something you're thinking about that's meaningless to you. When do you see that it's for real? Is when the hezbainenus brengt mit sich abechein in Aveda bepeil. If this hezbainenus is actually going to lead, it's something that has a practical application, so then it means it's real. If you're thinking about something and you think that you're excited about something or the greatness of the Eibusher, but it doesn't actually move you to action, it doesn't change you, it doesn't affect you, so then it's not for real. You didn't really relate to this. You're thinking about it, but it hasn't really touched you. Where do you see? What's the indication that it actually moved you if you move to action? So therefore, even in the world of this Aveda, of Ruchnis, Ruchnis is the Aveda. But if you want to have a siman to know that it's for real, so let's see if it leads to action. That's one pshat in Talmud Mevile de Maise. The Maise, if it could lead to action, is an indication whether your Talmud is a real Talmud or it's not just a flawed kind of a Talmud. Beis, another and deeper approach in understanding how Maise is relevant for the Talmud, for the experience of the learning or the Ruchni Zegaveda. The Shleimus from Talmud. There's an additional level in your learning. There's an additional depth and a higher level of learning that will come is verbunden mit Mevilidei Maise, that happens through action. The fact that it's something which leads to action is going to add in the depth of your learning. It brings your learning to a different level. In other words, not only like in the first way that it's a siman that your learning is not flawed and that it's correct, it could be applied, but when something is important to you because you need to apply it, so it will actually bring you to a deeper level in learning. And you see this very simply as sumachlet zayin welche von die svares seisres, welche seinen da besichla is die richtige. When a person has all kinds of ideas and theories and pshatim and svares and anything he's learning and he wants to figure out so which one is correct. Und was is mochrech zum machlet sein? And why does he have to figure out? Sometimes you just leave it as is. You learn a sugya, mara machada, and there's the svara like this, the svara like that, and it's all true, it's all part of Torah. But then sometimes you have to actually figure out the psak din. And why? Well, this is negeya l'maisa b'poil. You're learning with the intention to actually apply it. You want to actually know the halacha b'poil. You're going to have to go over the sugya again, see it from a deeper level to actually end up with our conclusion, seeing who the halacha is like or how we paskin. So when a person is actually going to be applying it, this brings you to a deeper level of learning. So it's not only that the maise, the fact that you could apply it, means, and it's an indication that your learning is correct and that the seichel you're learning is not just a theory, but if it's something that's actually now relevant for you, you need to apply it right now, you need to know what the din is, you're going to be forced to learn it on a deeper level. Since over here the person is not just in the world of theory, over here the person is not just using meiser as a barometer to know whether his seichel is flawed or whether his seichel is correct, but he needs to actually apply it now. So he needs to know the actual halacha. If you're learning with that approach, you need to actually apply it, you're going to find yourself learning on an actual deeper level than you would be otherwise when you would still be learning a sugya. So this shows that the world of action, when it has to be applied, affects the depth of your learning itself. So therefore it said, Talmud Godel, Sha Talmud Mevi Lidei Maise, the greatness of learning Torah is the fact that it leads to action. So what does this mean? Was meint nit not as Maise is av chonoiv Talmud. So this means that not only is the fact that it could be applied an indication that your learning is not flawed, that your learning is correct, not as Maise, if you're actually learning with the intent to apply it, and you need to apply this right now, Machdem Talmud Godel. This brings you to a deeper level of learning. You have to learn to actually see the psak din. Was das ist verbunden damit, was meise ruft is Gadlus and Talmud. That's what Chazal mean when they say Godel Talmud. Godel Talmud doesn't only mean that Talmud is greater than action, because Talmud leads to action, but it actually brings a deeper level in your learning, a Gadlus in the Talmud, because you have to apply it. So that's another pshat. This is another approach explaining how the Maise is relevant for the Talmud. When you have to actually apply it, it brings you to a deeper understanding, a deeper level of learning. And however, in both of these explanations of how the action is relevant for the learning, is the Adgoshe in the Minyan Talmud Malase. What are we emphasizing here? What are we talking about? Your learning and the level of your learning. Wie das wird bewiesen, Whether the fact that it could be applied is an indication that your learning is proper and correct, or that the fact that you need to apply it now is going to force you to learn on a deeper level. Okay, so this is all regarding the level of your learning. In the Marshtanayfin is nit neged the Maisa B'Payil in the first way that we explained that action is just used as an indication that your learning is not flawed. So the actual application, to actually apply it, that's not relevant here. We're not talking about a person that's learning with the intention to actually apply something now. Says wie Maisa is noch in the Welt von Seichel. It's all within the world of the Seichel, which means the Psakdin, the Bechein, von der is Beinenus, within the world of Seichel. So there, if a person wants to have the measuring stick to know if what he's learning is correct, he has to measure and judge and see, could this be applied? Could it be used? Is there a bechein here? Is there something that moves me? So this is all within the world of the inspiration, within the world of the isbayinus, within the world of learning. So you have to have that measuring stick to know if it's real. That's the first way. Or in the second way, I fill in dem zweiten Neufen, wo se redt sich bedafke wegen Maisa B'Payil. In the second way that we said that action adds a shleimus, it brings your learning to a deeper level. So here we're talking about someone that's learning and he actually needs to apply it. And because he needs to apply it, so now it brings him to a deeper learning. How do I apply it? Is this actually true? And that forces him the fact that he's going to transition from the world of ideas to the world of action, which is more specific and concrete. So this forces him also to go back to the seichel, and it should be more concrete and on a more deeper, accurate level. So over here it's talking about Maisa B'Payil influencing the world of your seichel. Is es aber nor das as Maisa bringt Shleimus in Talmud. It's the fact that action that you have to apply is going to add to the depth of your learning. That because you need to apply it, so the world of action will then influence the world of your thinking, to think on a deeper level. But, und nicht wie die Meile drückt sich aus in der Meise Gufa mitzad atzma. However, we're not talking about the Meila of Talmud being expressed in the action itself. The action itself is separate from the Talmud. There's the world of learning, there's the world of Aveda, which is Ruchnius, and then there's the world of action. These are two separate worlds that are unrelated to each other. Elamai, one affects the other, whether one is an indication on the other within the world of Seichel Gufa, or whether the world of Maisa B'Payil could have an impact on the depth of your learning. So one influences the other, but there's still two completely separate worlds. The world of Maisa on its own is a world of action. It's not the world of Talmud. That's these two explanations. But then we come to a deeper explanation, which is the ultimate purpose. Says da noch a hechere neufen. Then you have a deeper approach. Gimel, the third approach of what this means, that Talmud and Maisa are related to each other. That Talmud mevi lidei Maisa, when we say that the learning leads to action, via is nit selib Talmud, not for the purpose of your learning, that your learning should be on a proper level, nor selib Maisa Gufa, that your learning, whatever inspiration and whatever level there is in your learning, is extended out and is coming into the world of action in itself. Trakt darab dem eura seichel in im art von Maisa azoi. So he brings down, he's able to carry down the same level of inspiration, the same level of connection or understanding that exists within the world of ideas or within the world of his Aveda, over there in him art von Maisa. And he extends it down and connects together the world of ideas and the world of actions, that they become all one. It becomes all one and the same. Even when he's in the world of action, whatever he is that he's doing, is der Mensch durchgenommen mit den Eura Seichel. He's permeated with the same inspiration and with the same clarity that he had in the world of Seichel. Das ist am Meise von einem Menschen, was bei ihm ist Teikif Eura Seichel begoli. The same clarity and the same approach and the same inspiration that exists in the world of ideas or in that level of his Aveda, which is removed of action, is brought out and is extended and is connected to the world of action mitzad atzma. That the world of action should be fully one with the world of your seichel. That the two become one and the same. The Talmud and the Maisa come to be one and on the same level. In other words, not that Maisa is a separate world, Talmud is another world, and we use Maisa as the barometer for Talmud, or we use Maisa to bring you to a deeper level of Talmud. the Talmud extends out and unites the Maisa, that they both become one and the same, that the same light that there is and the same inspiration that exists in the world of Talmud comes out into the world of Maisa. That's the ultimate kavanah of the idea of Talmud Mevil de Maisa, or Leah Medrash Iker Ela Maisa. So now the Rebbe will explain, the Rebbe will focus here on this last eifim more specifically and explain how this is possible. Wie can Talmud, was in Yonai is Seichel Sheberoish, durchnehmen den Menschen b'shas er is an asiyah. So how is this possible that Talmud, which refers to the experience of a person learning using his mind and understanding, or the ruchni is the ga'aveda of his bainanus, how could that be with the same exact intensity and the same exact level when a person is in the world of action? The world of action is very far from the world of seichel. So yes, both are important components in Avedus Hashem, but they're very far from each other. Even if you'll say that one can influence the other, as the Rebbe explained in the first two Eifanim, but to say that the very same level of a connection and approach that there is in the world of Seichel, that extends out and is applied and is there in the world of action. Action is action and Seichel is Seichel. What's the connection between them? So the explanation here is as follows. Is der Inyan bezeh, the point here is, wenn a Yid liegt in Talmud nor an anayfen chitzayni. If your experience of learning is external, and when the Rebbe says external, the Rebbe explains immediately what he means. The Rebbe doesn't mean external in the simple sense that it's just external, that it's meaningless to you. External means, was mitzat chitzayni is hanefesh, is yede koyach mugbul in zayin art. Chitzayni is in this context means that a person has, his nefesh has, all different kinds of koyches. You have your koyach ha-seichel, your koyach ha-midais, your koyach ha-maisa, koyach ha-dibor, and so on. That's chitzenius ha-nefesh, because that's already the level of the nefesh where it comes out of its source, and it's divided in specific koyches of each one having its own function, it's in its own place. So if when you're learning, so you're using your koyach ha-seichel, fully involved in understanding, so you could be learning in a very, very deep and powerful way, but that's still called chitzenius ha-nefesh, because you're just learning with the Chelek ha-seichel of your nefesh. So then what happens is yede koyach mugbul in zayin art. Every koyach that the Eibishter gives you in your part of the nefesh that it has and that function is limited to its experience of where it is. Seichel in moyach. Seichel is an experience of a person's mind. Midas and leiv, a person's feelings are in his heart. Maisin, yedayim, the actions with your hand. It's the different organs in the body because it's completely different experiences of the person, different parts of the nefesh. There's a person of action, there's a time of action, there's a time of thinking, of learning, a time of feeling, totally different experiences, different parts of the nefesh. So then, if that's the person's approach to his learning, it's impossible to say that the same connection and the same level of oir that there is in seichel is there in maisa as well. What's the connection between maisa and seichel? There's a huge distance between seichel and action. Und Rebbe, when there is reingetan in Talmud, so when he's involved in his learning in the world of ideas to understand with svaris, kein meise mit sadatzmai, was es viel niedriger von Seichel, mit vernehmen, kein art bei ihm. So then, action, the world of action, which is much lower than the world of thinking and ideas, has no place by such a person. You see sometimes two people, one person is in the world of Seichel, by him everything is a theory and an idea, and another person which is very action-oriented. These two people can't have a conversation. It's two totally different worlds. What's the connection? Seiden nor in dem Prat, was meise geht zu in Talmud. If there's something in the world of action that will contribute to the world of ideas, of Seichel, so then Maisa can influence the Talmud. As the Rebbe explained in the first two ways, how Maisa itself adds a depth to the world of Talmud. So, but this is all when Talmud has its function, Maisa has its function, Chitzonius HaNefesh, when you're involved in it only on that level of your learning that's related to that koyach. Aber, however, when a person is involved in his learning beyond the seichel, with the essence of his soul, his learning, the seichel, is not just the seichel. The seichel is an opening to draw in the entire being, the entire entity of the person into this. Dan is nicht shaykh zu sagen, as es ist da am Ort benafshay, was es bestiert zu sein Chachma. So then you can't say that there's another part of the person's keiches that is not part of this, or that's even a contradiction, or Far from this. In dem Eifen is nit nor was Talmud wirkt auf Meise. So over here, it's not only that the Talmud, that his experience of learning, will influence his actions, was dazu is genug the achlata. For what you learn to have an influence on your actions, you only need primarily the resolution, which is the netzach v'hoid, the lebar b'megufa, the bechein. You need that netzach and hoid, which is actually outside of the main kaiches of a person, to have that final resolution to do it. You don't even need the actual world of ideas itself to influence the action. It's just the bechein that influences the action. So we're not talking about that. Not only that it influences, nor nochmer, ze kenen zayin bevasachas. If a person gets drawn into the seichel with the pnimius of his nefesh, the seichel is opening him up to the very essence of the person being connected to what he's learning, so then the full person is involved in this. So therefore, no nachmer, ze kenen zayin bevasachas. You could have the involvement of the seichel and all the keiches, including even the action, all at once. Der teikef ha-seichel werd nit geminnert euch b'shas der Mensch in meise. The strength and the power of his connection there is in the world of seichel doesn't get minimized when it's applied in action. Because it's not just seichel. The seichel is really just the opening to a much deeper connection of the essence of the person, and therefore that essence is the essence of every part of the person. It's the essence of the seichel, of his midas, and even of his maise. B'lashon Chassidus, the language that's used in Chassidus regarding this concept, mitzad moichin de gadlus, etzem ha-moichin, the real source of moichin, which is not just understanding, but moichin is the ability of a person to be open to a fresh, new approach that completely envelops the person. So when you have moichin de gadlus, kommt an der eira seichel k'moi shehu in alle keiches vi ze zenen b'mekaimam bis in meise. So here, you have the moichin itself, the eira seichel with its full intensity, and it reaches into Maise in its place in Maise. Two totally seemingly opposites. Both the intensity of the world of Seichel and at the same time the full extent of the lowest extent of Maise, and they both come together at the same time. That's the chiddush of this kind of connection. Moichin de gadlus. When a person is connecting, his very essence is connecting to something, and it's not just an understanding of something, but the understanding is really opening him up to connecting with his essence. So then the whole person is in this. With this we could explain very geschmack and well the wording that the Rambam says regarding a chacham. Just as a chacham is noticeable with his wisdom, kach, in the same way, so too a chacham has to be noticeable in his behavior, in his actions, in his eating, and so on. The Rambam uses the expression kishem kach. That's what the Rebbe now says. That in a chachama mitasa is a true wise man means as follows: as chachme werd sein ganze mohus. The chachme becomes his whole identity. It's not just one function of the world of chachme, but this opens him up entirely. It envelops the whole person. As chachme werd sein ganze mohus azoi, as das was is a chacham is nicker in alle seine inyanen v'koiches in demselben Eifen. Kishem chulu kach. The Rambam uses the expression kishem kach. Not only that your chachma can have a certain impact on your behavior, but it's the very same intensity of chachma that's there and present in your actions. Because it's not about chachma, it's not about maise, it's deeper. It's your very identity, it's your very essence, and therefore they're present, that essence is present both in the actions as much as it is in the chachma. Oich, when it is fanumim, b'maisav, even when he's involved in his actions. Saying seemingly, it's much lower, it's very removed of a person's wisdom, is niker in them, you see in the person the same exact strength. And the Rebbe clarifies, nit nor as if er bavirkt von chachmase. We're not talking about only a chacham, that his actions are influenced by the ideas that he has. The Einzach werd bavirkt von a zweite. Like two different worlds, two different entities, or two different kaiches in the person, and one influences the other. Was dann is eines askus b'maisav be'eis is b'yiride von chachmasei. So then, when he's involved in the world of action, which is very far and very low from the world of ideas, ubemele as is demot nit azay muvdol mishara am, vi is asik b'chachmasei. So then he's not going to be the same chacham with the same intensity and the same level as it is when he is in his learning and his chachma, because Maisa is being influenced by his chachma, but it's still a different world. It's much lower than his chachma. That's not what we're talking about. The Rambam is saying Keshem Kach, which means Nar die selbe Havdalah mishara wie sein Havdalah von sein Be'ez Eska bechachmasai b'deyesav. The very same level that he has in his chachma, that very same level is there in his Maisa, because the chachma and the Maisa became one. It's his essence. Weil wenn der chachma und sein ganzer Mohus is euch, wenn is in Maisa, weil wenn der chachma is ein ganzer Mohus, is euch, wenn is in Maisa, bleibt bedargasai, bechachmasai. If this became his entire identity, so therefore that very same inspiration, that very same level that he has in his chachma is present with his fullest extent in the Maisa as well. This is the ultimate purpose of what Chazal tell us, Le'a medrash el Maisa. That the real medrash, the real experience of learning is when the learning grabs your whole essence. And then it comes out, it gets extended into the world of Maisa, and Chachma and Maisa become one and the same, and you could have the same inspiration within the world of Maisa Gufa. There it has the same koyach of Chachma. So now we come back to the Meraglim. What was the mistake of the Meraglim? Yesh loima, so we can say, as the Sheiresh von Anhagas HaMeraglim is nit was sie haben nit gewollt Maisa Bechlal. The root of their mistake, as the Rebbe already said before, is not that they weren't interested in the fulfillment of mitzvahs and action at all. Can't say that. Nor was bei Zeyat gefällt Tachlis HaShleimos in Zeyer Talmud Gufa. The root of their mistake is in their approach of their learning. They wanted to remain in the midbar in learning Torah. If they would have really understood the proper approach to learning, so then they would have understood that the deepest and proper approach of learning itself demands that it should come out and be there present in action as well. So the root of their mistake is not regarding Maisa. The root of their mistake is within their approach of learning itself. Deir HaMidbar is in Yonei Torah. The generation of the Midbar is all about learning Torah. Deir Deir, they're referred to as the Deir of the knowledge, of learning. So he's given in Midbar, so they were in the Midbar with the limit that Torah is betachlis hashleimus. They learned Torah on the highest level. By the Meraglim is aber nit given the tachlis hashleimus in der Inyan von Talmud mevile de Maisa. They, however, did not have the real shleimus of learning, which is that the learning has to lead to action. The hechste oifen anal, which refers to the highest level of what this means, as mitzad meichen de gadlus, was chachme wert der ganze mohus von Menschen. When you have the real learning, the real level of learning, when it becomes your whole entity, it becomes the very essence of the person, is nitok in hefsek zwischen Talmud und Maisa. So then, because it's your essence, it's not limited to one function, it's not limited to chachma. Comes down in Maisa with the same intensity as the world of Talmud. That's the level that the Meraglim made a mistake that they did not have. As euch when the Mensch is in Maisa, bleibt der Reira Seichel betokfa. Even in the world of Maisa, it remains with the same strength. Und der Rebbe is Reingetonkeit in Talmud mevile de Maisa given. So therefore, they also understood that Talmud has to lead to action, has to influence your action. But it was only nicht an Aneufen von herabkommen in Olam HaMaisa Eretz Yisrael und dort herabtragen der Eira Teire von Midbar. They didn't appreciate what it means that we're going to completely leave the world of Talmud and we're going to come to a world of action, and that there's any significance to the world of action as it is to itself, separated from the world of Talmud, from the world of being separated in the Midbar. That they didn't understand. Rather, nor wie in der Eufen von Maisa, wie das ist in Midbar Gufa. They appreciated how Maisa could contribute to the depth of the Talmud, all within the world of Talmud itself. Das meint, Maisa als Oiftu in Teire, Talmud kanal sivav. The first two ways that the Rebbe said that the Maisa is used as an Evan Abaychen for your Talmud, to know that your tzvara is correct, that your aveda is real, that it's really moving you, or that if it's relevant from Maisa, so it brings your level of learning to a deeper level, it adds and it brings it to a deeper shleimus of learning, but all the world of Maisa as it contributes to your learning. How about the world of Maisa mitzadatzma, separated from your learning? The world of Maisa mitzadatzma, what does Maisa have to do with Talmud? Two completely separate worlds. Therefore, the Meraglim did not agree to entering into a place of Maisa mitzadatzma, where you're going to have occupation of Maisa separated from the learning. But if you come to the deepest level of what Talmud and Maisa means, that Gadol Talmud Shemevli Maisa, which means that you have to extend the same takeoff of inspiration of Talmud into the world of Maisa. Why? Because it's all one essence, and therefore the two come together. So then you're able to take the full takeoff of the Talmud and bring it down fully into the world of Maisa as it is, because really it's all one and the same. It all extends and brings down the Talmud into the world of Maisa Gufa. That's the level that the Meraglim did not appreciate. Pianal, so now based on this, Asibas, an Hogas HaMeraglim, hat sich angeheben, nit mitzad ha'asnagdus zu Maisa. The cause and their mistake starts not because they had an opposition to action, to the necessity of doing mitzvahs. No mitzad ha'chesarin, betachlis shleimus halimud. They did not have the full and deepest level within their learning. In their aveda b'mayach, in their connection b'mayach. If even in their mayach, if their learning would have been proper with the full essence, then it would have enveloped them fully. Maisa would be part of that. That's where their mistake starts. This gives us a deeper understanding. The Maimah from Rabbi Yitzchak, le'olsa b'yadeinu ela echad v'chulo. Rabbi Yitzchak says that we only can take one message from the names of the Meraglim. And the explanation is as follows. In the Deiris Rishayim, in earlier generations, Aviseinu, our ancestors, when es gewend the Aveda mitzad meichen shebereish, their main Aveda entailed the thinking, the learning, the Ruchni is the Aveda. Hat sich dann gefordert zu wissen, wie sei zu bewahren, as the Aveda soll sein, beöfen an Nirze, tachlis shleimus halimud. So over here, in order to correct this mistake, in order that the approach of learning should be proper. So where do you have to address this? You have to address it there in what their main occupation was, in their approach of learning. Was ist verbunden mit tachlis shleimus habittel, for a person to have the proper approach in learning, that he should allow his full essence to get involved in the learning. And it's not just the koyach of understanding, of that function of seichel that's involved in your learning. That comes with the proper bittul. You have to learn with the proper bittul to know that it's really your essence that's connected to this. It's not just your understanding. That's the main thing that has to be addressed. Nit, wie bei dem Meraglim, as es ist da a hefsik zwischen aveda pnimis, mayach and maisa. Unlike the mistake of the Meraglim, where they created the separation. There's the world of Aveda Pnimis, of the deeper and inner, Ruchni is the Aveda, and then there's the world of action. So that's in the Deiris Rishayim, where the main source of their mistake is all within their Ruchni is the Aveda, so there it has to be corrected. The Ruchni is the Aveda has to be with the proper approach and the proper bittul. Und wie bald, als in der Aveda sind doch looking zwischen ein Shevet und dem Zweiten. Here, when it comes to the Ruchni is the Aveda, there are differences between one Shevet and another. Jede Shevet hat sein Derech v'shar in Avedas Hashem. Every Shevet has its way, its gateway to serving Hashem. In Ruchni is, so you have Avos Hashem, you have Yiras Hashem, and so on. Every Shevet has its way. Darf man wissen, wie zu äußern sich von dem Tos, von jedem, von dem Meraglim, so you have to know each one of the names and the mistake that each one specifically made with their personal Ruchni is the Gaveda of their Shevet. Die Bavaranish by Yeda von Zeh is Leiten Eif and Aveda von Zayin Shevet. You have to apply it regarding Avos Hashem, regarding Yiras Hashem, and different levels in Seichel, or whatever it may be. But in the Ruchni is the Gaveda, there are all the different names of all the different levels of how you have to apply this idea to bring it in the proper way of Bittul, applied to each level. That's all regarding the Deiris Rishayim. 12 different names with 12 different Avedas. However, in the Spätige Gizmanim, in later times, noch Harishayim Kamalachim, after the earlier generations, which the Gemara says is compared to people that are like angels, then Isma to Adeiris, the generations are much lower and we have much less of an ability to learn and understand with our Seichel and so on. Ubefrat, when Nofla Sukkis David at Pchines Raglayim ve'Kvayim. So the Yidden have fallen down to a very low place like the heels of the feet. Expression that Alter Rebbe uses in Tanya. Und der Ikra Aveda is an Asiyah, Maisa mitzvahs. Our main occupation is in the actions, in fulfilling the mitzvahs. Dann is nit azene geya zu bewahren der Tos hameraglim wie is noch besharshay mekayrei. For us, it's not so important to explain and to give the message of the mistake of the Meraglim as it starts in its source in the Ruchni is the Gaveda. In the Ruchni is the Gaveda. And the Rabbi here in the parentheses clarifies, nit stam der lernen, nor tachlis hashleimus bezeh, Und in sein Bittel Atzmai, we're talking about the mistake in their learning. We're not only talking about any regular learning, but we're talking about that they didn't have the full extent and the deepest level of learning with the proper bittul that it's supposed to be. Will not come into a mitis davar anilma, that a person should learn completely, leaving his own ego and his own self out, just to learn objectively, to know what the Eibishter wants here, and so on. Aveda von Meichen, the Aveda of learning and the Aveda of Meichen, which was the earlier generations. Was in them is called chad l'fum shiur delay. So over here, as said before, that kind of aveda, so every person is on their level. There's a different approach and a different level of learning. No, rather, what's relevant to us, the message that we take from the mistake of the Meraglim is in the Teitzah b'negetz avedas ha-mitzvahs. Only regarding the outcome, the focus that there has to be in mitzvahs. V'steira achas o mishpat echad l'kulonu b'kiyim kol ha-teira o mitzvahs b'bchinas maisa. For us, what's relevant is the application in action. We're the generation of action. And therefore, the only message that we have to take from the Meraglim is regarding the Teitzah, the result of their mistake, that they did not want to focus on action. Now, regarding this result of their mistake, that was equal by all the Meraglim, that they didn't want to come into the world of action, into Eretz Yisrael. As es darf nit sein, ikra aved in olam ha'maisa, that their mistake was that you don't need the world of action. So if you look at the source of their mistake, which begins in the world of Moichin, in the world of Talmud, so there are 12 different names. That's the message that was relevant to them. What Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is, also be yadeinu ele echad, what's relevant to us is the result of their mistake, which is regarding the importance of Maisa. Und das meint also be yadeinu ele echad. Das was is also be yadeinu and unser aveda from Shemes HaMeraglim. What's relevant for us and our aveda that we can take from the names of the Meraglim is that inyan echad and ukudim mushutefes from Zayala. It's just one point and the equal point that's the same by all of them. Was wie es muss sein, the aveda from Maisa, that it's required and you must have action. Wie sie is b'shave by alle Yidden in alle Deiris on kein chalukim. And this, the requirement of action, is equal by all Yidden in all generations without any differences. Therefore, that's the one thing that Rabbi Yitzchak says that we take from the Meraglim. Und die Bavaranish is merumiz and susur shesasar maisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we understand what it means when it says that his name susur, that he destroyed Hashem's actions. Which actions are we referring to, as the Rebbe asked? The Rebbe shot b'shafen olam ha'asiyah, Maisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It refers to the olam ha'asiyah that the Rebbe created. Mit der Kavane, as Yidden sollen im Boyen machen davon adire lo yisbarach, that the Yidden should construct and build the world to be a place, a dwelling for the Rebbe. Und der Rebbe, and therefore, durch nit machen Maisa mitzvahs der Iker, is machas v'shalem soiser Maisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you don't make the main focus, the actions in this physical world that the Rebbe created for this purpose, you're destroying, God forbid, the action, the world that the Rebbe created for this purpose. Der Olam ha'asiyah bleibt chas v'shalem atzersterter. So then this world remains a place which is destroyed, which doesn't have the dwelling of the Eibishter. Nit ken aufgebaut to dir leis barach. It's not built up to be a dwelling for the Eibishter. That's the Maisa that we're referring to over here. The Yisayrim is that we could even take this a step further and say, Al derech mayim chazal, like the Yerushalmi says, Kol doyer she'einin nivne beis hamikdash b'yamav, mailen olav hakosev ki'ilu hu achrivai. A generation that did not build the Beis HaMikdash, it wasn't built in their generation, it's as if they destroyed it. So if you don't make a dire b'tachtayna for the Eibishter in the world, it's as if you're destroying the world that the Eibishter creates. That's the Susur, Sasar Maisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which this is the equal and one message that's relevant for us to take out of the Meraglim. However, one could ask the question, how is this even possible? Wie bald as the Rebbe baschaffen die Welt mit dort der Kavana. The Rebbe created the world with this purpose. Oh, that is called Yachave Makabiyade. The Rebbe is almighty and there's no one that could stop him of anything. Wie can a Yid, a Nivra, how could a Yid, a created being, Soise sein, Maisa Kadosh Baruch Hu? He can destroy Hashem's actions und nicht the lassen as the Kavanah soll sich ausführen in jeden Prat von der Meilam HaAsiyah and not allow Hashem's purpose to fulfill in every detail that's created in the world. How could a human being come and ruin and destroy Hashem's plan? Bishleime, wenn die Kavanah wollten nicht herausgekommen in die Bure Yisbarach. Now, if Hashem's purpose of creation would have not been verbally expressed in Hashem's words, so then we can answer as it's explained in Chassidus, as wie bald der Rotzen is verblieben in Machshavte Yisbarach, since Hashem's plan and desire remains, so to speak, in his thought, was is Heche von Azulas Welt, like thought by a person below, is removed of any other that doesn't know what he's thinking, and it's within, it's internal. So too Hashem's Machshava, Hashem's Rotzen is removed of creation, is es nit machriach dem Adam. So this does not force us to act accordingly. It remains in a different reality. This is the hezbollah that Chassidus says regarding why Hashem's plan and Ratzon is not a contradiction to us having our own free choice. However, Hashem's desire that we should serve Him and create the Dira in this world was expressed in words, and atzivi b'dibur, it came out in words. Hashem's words is as powerful as action, and therefore, how can a Yid destroy and ruin Hashem's plan, which was expressed in words, which is an action? Is the teretz of them, that's the continuation of the Gemara. As der Sesur is ben atoitzah von mechal she'asa atzmei moch. The possibility to destroy Hashem's plan comes from the fact that Hashem makes himself small. What the Pirish Apnimi in them is, so the deeper meaning of this is, as es retzich nit nur wegen der Pe'ula von Meraglim, we're not only speaking about what the Meraglim have done, that they didn't believe in Hashem's abilities, nor wegen Kavayachol dem Eibishter, and it's speaking about the Eibishter himself, making himself small. Kidei as a Yid zal haben Bchira Chavshis, so that a Yid should have free choice. Hat der Eibishter Kavayachol sich gemacht, mach v'chalash. The Eibishter, so to speak, lowered himself, weakened himself, as ein Dibur soll nit machriach sein meise Adam, that the power of Hashem's speech should not force a person. Hat gegeben a Yidin dem Koyach zu Tonchas v'shalom heipech ratzon Hashem, and the Eibishter gives the Yid the possibility to do, God forbid, opposite of what Hashem wants. Bis zu kennen, soise sein meise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the point that a Yid could actually go against and destroy Hashem's plan. That's the meaning of Sesur ben Michal. This is the one message that Rabbi Yitzchak said that we have to take from the Meraglim. The Teitzah of their mistake that's equal by all of the Meraglim. Now, however, one could not, if this is the only message, now you could think, as the einzige Sach, was man darf sich bewahren bedeutet, was nachher erscheinen. Only thing that we have to be worried about and concerned with in later generations, after the earlier generations, after the generations of our ancestors, is as on it fell in Maisa. That action shouldn't be lacking in action. That's it. As long as I'm in action, Maisa b'payil, I'm doing everything the way it's demanded of me. Anything deeper beyond that in seichel or in middis and my feelings and my connection on a deeper level, that's irrelevant. So the Rebbe says, no, that's not true. Here comes Rabbi Yechanan and says, there is another deeper message here that we as well also have to learn from the name Nachbi ben Vavsi, which means he hid over Hashem's words. What are we talking about over here when it says hiding Hashem's words? Euch bei uns, even in our Aveda today, darf euch sein die Bavarenisch v'shlile von hechbi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We also have to forewarn ourselves, and we also have to see to it not to cover Hashem's words. What does this mean? We have to connect, as the Rebbe will explain, to a deeper dimension higher than Maisa. Weil dafke durch dem is the Aveda von Maisa kedeboy, because only then could the Aveda of our Maisa be the way it's supposed to be. Even if the main Aveda of our generation is Maisa, and that is the message that Rabbi Yitzchak says, equal from all the Meraglim, but for the Aveda of Maisa to be the way it's demanded, we also need the deeper dimension of Dvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is this referring to? Dvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu refers to B'dvar Havaya Shamayim Nasu. That Dvar Havaya is versus Mechai, Yed Nivra, Maisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we said before, Maisa refers to the Olam HaAsiyah the Eibishter created. So Dvarav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu refers to the Eibishter's words, to the Chayis of the Eibishter, which is within every action, which is within Olam HaAsiyah. Darfen sich bewahren von Hechbi Dvarav. So we have to be careful not to hide and separate from Hashem's words, from the chayes of the Eibishter. Which means, as the meisim müssen sein an aneufen, as man soll in im zen dem dvar avaye dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu was is mechaye de meise. The actions of your mitzvahs, the actions that you do, should be infused with the energy, with the dvarav, with the chayes of the Eibishter in your actions. It shouldn't just be dry actions. Don't say, oh, we're the generation of action, so we don't have to just action, nothing else. No. Don't hide. Allow the chayes of the Eibishter to flow into your actions as well. Why is that so relevant? Aren't we the generation of action? Dire b'tachteinim. So the Rabbi explains, weil wir geretschen viel mal, it was already said more than once, kedei, as die dire lo yizbarach en oila ma'asiyah, was jeden bayen durch der Avodah von Meise soll sein a lichtike. In order that this dwelling that we're building for Hashem, yes, here in action with the Maisa, that's the main place, that the B'dira B'tachteinim, but it's a dwelling. A dwelling has to be a beautiful, illuminated dwelling for the Eibishter, not just a dark, dingy, dry place. The Seis says, to have the revelation of the Eibishter in this world. Not just the presence and the action, but also the revelation of the Eibishter. Is es durch dem, was die Meisen von Ayiden sind lichtige Meisen. So the actions that we do in the mitzvahs have to be infused with light, has to be infused with energy. Met de hert in alle Meisen den dvar avaye was ze mechaye, ob mele wird avede getan mit chayes v'chulu. That the person should sense what his actions are. He should sense the energy of the Eibishter in his actions. And therefore the actions will be done with a vigor, with an excitement that goes into these actions because of the dvar Hashem that he's feeling. That's the additional requirement that Rabbi Yechanan is adding. Oh, Nachbi. Continuing what the Gemara says, what is Nachbi? Hechbi dvarav is ben atoitza fon vavsi shepisa al midaisav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when a person is hiding over this chayis, over the dvarav, over the words of the Eibishter, how does that happen? It's a result of skipping over the Eibishter's midas. And the Gemara specifically points out the midas of the Eibishter. Das, was bei Ayiden can sein chas v'shalom. Hech bi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that he's hiding the Eibishter's words, which means deheret nit the dvaravayev was mechaya jeden nivra. He's not sensing the energy of the Eibishter that there is in his actions, and the actions become just simple, dry actions. Is mitzadem was hipt iber the aveda mitzad midas. He's skipping a main component of his aveda, the aveda of midas, the feelings, the connection of the midas to the Eibishter. Was nennt sich vom Midaisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our feelings that we have in our Aveda, the Avos Hashem, the Yiras Hashem, feeling the Chayas of the Eibishter, is a result of the Eibishter's Midas that there are in the world. So therefore, how does a person come to being Nachbi, that he hides the Eibishter's Chayas, and he just does the dry Maisa, is because he's skipping the Midas of the Eibishter. Durech Ma'ere Zayin Avel Hashem. If a person awakens within himself a love for Hashem, is der Gili Eure Lekiben Nafshe, wenn is noch Heche vom Welt, so then that connection and that revelation that he has in his Avos Hashem, before he comes to action, when he's still removed of the action, git dem koyach, that will, however, give him the power, as oich, v'mefanent sich, mit idvarim gashmi and maisa, that even when he comes and he's occupied with the actions, which is the main place and the main focus, zol nit zayin, hech bidvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Avos Hashem will also infuse energy and feeling into his actions, that it should be a lichte gedire. Yes, the main approach is the maisa. We're a different generation. The main approach is Taka, the main message of Rabbi Yitzchak, Echad, one approach of Maisa. But that approach of Echad, Af Anu Neymar, we also have to infuse it with the midas of the Eibishter, with Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, that it should be a lichte gedire. Damit wird man verstehen, dem Diok, Af Anu Neymar. Now we can understand what Rabbi Yechanan was saying, that we as well could interpret, and this is different than what Rabbi Yitzchak said, why he's saying Af Anu Neymar. Das, was bei den Meraglim is given, Hech bi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fact that by the Meraglim they had this mistake, that they covered the Eibishter's words, hat sich genommen mitzadem, was sie haben gewollt bleiben in Olam HaMachshave. By them, their mistake was they wanted to remain removed from the world. They wanted to remain in the world of Machshave, wo es leicht b'chinas Machshavtoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where the deeper thought of the Eibishter is there. They didn't want to come down to the world of speech, der Dvar Avaye, was sich mislabischen Welt, to see and sense the chayes of the Eibishter, which is here, below, in this world. Azoi, as a dvar avai verbleit behelem, hechpi in Welt. So therefore they said, in the Welt, here in the Gashmis of the world, you see the Chayes of the Eibishter. There's much more Chayes of the Eibishter, Bligvul, above the world. In the world of Machshava, that's higher than here Dvarav. That was their mistake. Their mistake is they wanted to be higher than Dvarav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu. Und der Nachbi ben Ateitza from Vavsi, Shepisa al Midaisav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu. In their world, when they made that mistake, what was their mistake when it says that they skipped over the Eibishter's Midas? By Zay, the mistake of the Meraglim was, is weil sie haben gewollt überspringen die Darge von Midaisav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu. They wanted to ignore the level of the Eibishter's Midas. What does the level of the Eibishter's Midas refer to that they wanted to ignore? Was haben a Scheiches mit Welt? Wie Midas, when I mentioned, wir sind verbunden mit Azulas. Midas refers to the level of Elokos that relates to the existence of this world. Just like by a person's, his emotions are connected to someone else, or a reaction and a response and a feeling that relates to an other, so too, Midas by the Eibishter refers to that level of Elokos, which is the source of creation. As it says in the Maimer, the Bar Mitzvah Maimer, Benegay to Sheishis Yom Masa, the creation comes from the 6 Midas of the Eibishter. So the Meraglim said, the Midas of the Eibishter, that's a very low level. That's related to creation. They wanted to skip over that. Und nennen gleich von Meichen de la Maila was Kadmu Loilam. They were interested in connecting to the level of Machshave, to the level of Meichen that's above that, that's removed of the world. Was das ist die Sibbe von dem Helem in Dvarav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu in Sfiras HaMalchus. And therefore, this was the reason why there was a concealment in the Eibishter's words that actually come to create, the Eibishter created the world with the Sfira of Malchus, with the Eibishter's Dibur, because they wanted to remove of all that. Nachbi is Ben Vavsi. They covered over the Eibishter's words in the world. They weren't interested in connecting to this low level because they didn't even want to have the Midas. They wanted to go higher to the Meichen, to the Machshave. That they wanted to be secluded in Hecher. So here comes Rabbi Yochanan and says that we also have to apply the same message, but in the total reverse. Mir darf sich bewahren von Nachbi ben Vavsi in dem verkehrten Ketzei. We have to forewarn ourselves of this mistake, but in the complete opposite extreme. Man soll sich nicht mistapik sein mit Maisa allein. By us, because our main Aveda is action. That's what our generation is about. So we have to remember not to be happy and not to be satisfied with just the action. Just to be low in action. Not euch tan in die hechere Darges Havede von Dvarav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu and Midaisav Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu. But also to elevate ourselves, to connect also to the Chayes of the Eibishter, the words of the Eibishter, and the Midas of the Eibishter. So therefore Rabbi Yochanan says, the message, yes, we do have to take a message from the name Nachbi ben Vavsi, but it's different than Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak is saying that there's a tzad hashave of all the names of the Meraglim, of the mistake of the Meraglim, that we take and apply from the Teitzah of their mistake. One message that we need Maisa. Then Rabbi Yochanan says, the Meraglim made the mistake, they wanted to go higher. They didn't want to come down to the world of Midas or to the world of Dibur. We learn from there that we shouldn't remain so low. We shouldn't remain just with the world of action. We also need to include in our Avedis Hashem the Dvar of Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu and even more the Midais of Shelach Kadosh Baruch Hu. Beautiful, the way that Rabbi explained there, every single shlav, every single detail of the Gemara, everything is 100% meduyik and how it's so relevant and applied in our Aveda. But here, one final point. Ayid ken doch meinen, Ayid can make the following mistake. Emes take as euch in die Deiris achreinem darf sein nit nor meise nor euch avede pnimis von meiach v'leib. So now we understand that even in our generations, it's required to have not only action, as Rabbi Yitzchak said, but it's also relevant, and we need to infuse our avede with a deeper dimension of the heart and the mind to elevate that it should be a lichte gedire. However, we are found in the generation which is very low, like the heel of a foot. Is the Aveda nit mit hanemes. So our Aveda does not have the feelings and the connection on a deeper level. In the Pnimius, it's not real, it's not truthful. It doesn't really touch us in our heart the way it did in earlier generations. This is nit seichel sheberoish. It's not real seichel as it is in the world of ideas, because that's not the world that we're in. Or midas shebelev, in the world of emotions, to have a real hergish in the heart, to feel avos Hashem. We have the seichel and midas that are applied, that relate, the bechein that comes from the seichel, or the bechein that comes from the feelings, to be applied to the action. But the real, authentic experience of a world of seichel or the world of midas, to have avos Hashem, that doesn't relate to us. Heint, if so, wie kann durch sein Avede sich ausführen die Kavane von dir betachteinem? How can we fulfill to make a dwelling for the Eibishter? Was dazu fordert sich nicht nur Maisa allein, and it's demanded to have not only action, nor euch die Avede von Talmud, but also to have the Avede of Talmud. Was balaich the Avede von Maisa that illuminates the world of Maisa. In other words, it's not enough to have even just a level of mayach and leiv as it relates to Maisa. You have to have the actual Aveda of Talmud mitzad atzma. Even that is also relevant for the Aveda of Dir B'Tachteinim. This is an additional point, in addition to what the Rebbe said before, a lichte gedire. For that, it would be enough to have a level of ave related to the action. But the Rebbe, the Maramakim in Order 55, Chelek Zayin, over there it says, Ein chavish materes atzma, a person that's imprisoned cannot free himself. So therefore, to make the Dir B'Tachteinim in Maise, you must have the Aveda that's hecha from Welt, that's above this world, in order to be able to change the world and make a Dir B'Tachteinim. But we don't have that ability, though, to lift ourselves up to that level of Aveda that's above Maisa. By us, whatever we do is all Maisa-oriented. Even our Seichel and our Midas are also related to Maisa. So how can we have that? Is there beer in them? So the answer here is, Wie bald as alle Yidden von alle Deires zenen kaima achas shleima. Since all Yidden of all generations are like one big body. So therefore it comes out as the Aveda von die friedige Deires is der Mayach v'leiv von unserer Aveda in Raglayim v'akvayim. Their Aveda that they have done with their minds and hearts, removed from this world on a higher level, becomes the mind and heart of our actions, of our Aveda that we do here in our generation. It's one body. Ubemele is in unserer Aveda b'maisa mitzvahs euch faran behelem die kavanas Reish v'leiv ha-mitzvahs. So therefore we also have today infused, there's a hidden power in our Aveda in action that contains within it the ruchnisdige power of elevating us above the Welt in our actions. Und das ist, was Rabbi Yitzchak bewarnt, gleich an Anheb von sein Maimer. This is also explained in the introduction that Rabbi Yitzchak gives to his statement, Dovazeh Meseires Biyadeinu Ma'aviseinu, that Meraglim Al Shem Aseyim Nikru, that we have the tradition that the Meraglim's names are based on their actions. So he starts off saying about the fact that there's a tradition about all of the Meraglim, even though in the end he doesn't end up giving a lesson more than just one name. So why didn't he go directly to the lesson of that one name? Why does he start with the introduction about all the Meraglim? Emes take as an unzera Aveda b'poyal mamish is layalsa b'yedenu ela echad kanal barucha. In our Aveda there's only one name, one message that's relevant. As we explained, action. Aber alles, was hat sich getan in der Aveda von Aviseinu, but everything, all the 12 names, all the different aspects of the Aveda of Aviseinu, and the Rebbe emphasizes that it's Aviseinu, it's our forefathers, was in dem darf sein die Bewarnisch von alle Shemes HaMeraglim, and there, all the names, their names show the proper Aveda that had to be in their times, in the Ruchnisig Aveda, is Meseires Biyadeinu. This is also a tradition for us. Is das da b'yadeinu in unserer Aveda. This is a tradition, this is that we get the power from their Aveda to us here today. As the Rabbi explained, we're one body, and therefore whatever message and whatever there is in their Aveda is carried over and provided for us as well. Nor, das ist beifen von Meseires. A Meseire klalis behelem. It remains as a general tradition, it's concealed. The details of it is not explained and spelled out for us because it's not something that we can handle. Und loi also from Golos, Vehelen, Veheste, the Yeridas, Deiris Achreinim. It can't be elevated. We can't take it out from the low Golos that we are in our generation. Und Benegetz Aveda B'Poyel is also B'Yedenu Echad, the Aveda from Maisa. What we could interpret from all the names is that one message from Sesur B'Michal, the action. On the Ribber, so therefore, since we do have the power of the previous generation that's there behind us, it's the Behelem, the Koyach that's given to us, Ver durch unser Aveda and Maise, so therefore our Aveda that's done in action could accomplish Nishlam, the Kavana, we will complete the purpose from Lasis Le'Yizbarach, Dire B'Tachteinim, to make a dwelling for Hashem here below in this world.